Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the first ever iteration retrospective for composition analysis group. And today, I guess we for this retro we have two issues. The proposition one is for me, and I just added it as a kind of placeholder because it's not finished, and probably we can discuss it later. And there is one issue proposed by Fabian about support proxy settings of retire.js. And I think that we should discuss this one. So I can share my screen so everyone can see the issue. And Fabian, could you please tell us some details about this issue and what was how it I would be interested just to know how it was break down and what was details, what was this issue about, and what do you think could be done differently?
Yeah, so where this was about adding support for HTTP and HTTPS proxies in the retire.js analyzer. And it's important to share a bit of the background. We had a community contribution to implement that feature created long ago, but tests were missing. It's a bit tricky to test that. And also, what else about the context? So yeah, so we had this merge request created long ago. We had to remember things. Oh yeah, 13 and 10. Sorry, the 10. And this issue was added to the milestone very late in the process. Actually, it was added to 14.6 during 14.6, which is unusual, but it happens. And it had been refined when I started it. I started working on the implementation, that is working on the tests really. And yeah, sometime at the beginning of 14.6, Thiago, support engineer, shared an idea on how to implement the test. So it seemed doable, but okay. But then maybe we should jump to the retro part. So actually, I'm glad I did that. I didn't know about this upcoming iteration retrospective meeting, so I got lucky. Yeah, so it took longer than expected. I mean, it's not unusual, but in this particular case, I kept switching between the analyzer project, that is retire.js, and the test project, because it had to be tested using an external test project, and that was well, annoying for one thing, but also time consuming. So yeah, sometimes it's a necessary thing. Ideally, we can have image integration tests using RSpec, but in that case, it's not something we could have avoided, I think. But yeah, it's just a waste of focus and time, being forced to switch between projects. That's the first point. Second point, I didn't remember much about HTTP proxies really. And that's something I could have considered when starting the issue. that I needed a refresher. Well, I I know how it works, but there are details I had forgotten, and as a result, I didn't. My first implementation of the test was had flaws. That's something I could have avoided. That was the second point in the bullet list.
Excuse me, Fabian.
Yeah,
Sorry to interrupt.
yeah, because I'm going to speak for a long time. Maybe that's
Yeah,
for.
no, I just want to make sure we are focusing on the iteration value here, because part of the retro you're showing here is worth discussing, but it's more like a general retrospective feedback rather than what's really matters for the iteration value specifically. I think the third point is more relevant to that.
Yeah.
So I will leave you continue with this, but I just wanted to make sure that it's clear that this is about the iteration value rather than general retrospective.
Yes, thanks for saying that, because I got lost, and I'm new to this exercise. So thank you. So yes, third point is totally about that. I wanted to support both HTTP and HTTPS proxies, but eventually I realized that HTTP proxies are not needed in that case. We don't, because it's not secure, and we only care for secure things, features, and yeah, I guess by better refining the issue, we could have spotted that. Because the thing, it takes more time to test HTTP proxies support and HTTPS proxies support. When in the middle of that, I realized that it took more time and effort and knowledge to test both. So yeah.
And I have a follow-up question. Where it was possible to actually like split it into 2 iteration and deliver HTTPS proxy and only then HTTP proxy, or it's not like it's not reasonable?
Yeah, possibly, but I think I was influenced by the way the issue created by customer, by the way, was framed. The issue was HTTP proxy support. Okay, so all sorts of proxies. And when we engineers in this secure composition analysis group create issues, maybe we would have spotted that right from the beginning, but yeah, once the issue is created and framed, it's a bit harder to spot that.
Yeah, it's always easier afterwards, obviously.
Yeah.
but I think that's a good point of keeping that in mind when doing the refinement. It's clear right now that, yeah, it could have been spotted during the refinement. So this is maybe some tool that we can keep in mind when doing refinements to constantly reread the implementation plan maybe and see what are the separate bits that could be extracted maybe. And maybe it's not a good candidate, but at least asking the question, making the exercise could be an interesting step.
And maybe we are, and it's not even conscious, maybe we are hesitant to do that because it's a customer issue. We don't want to mess with their issues. And again, it's not necessarily conscious. Sorry.
But like I, as far as I understand, the issue was like the person created, like community contributor created merge request and created an issue at the same time, right?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, maybe we had the issue for the merge request first, actually. It's very possible that, could you?
So issue was created in July 29, and the merge request was created, oh no, no, the issue existed long before.
Okay, long before
the merge
request was created. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, it's kind of like looks like a valid point that we could actually like check it on during refinement. But yeah, that's why we actually do this retrospective, to just pick the things like that.
Yeah, maybe maybe that's because I think I was the one refining that issue. Actually, I didn't know. It wasn't clear to me how we would test a feature, and if this had been the case, then maybe I would have seen that we need two integration tests, and it's better if you can start with one and do the other one later, and thus we should have two issues. But since we didn't have details for how to test this, it didn't appear clearly in the issue. Do you see what I mean? Because if you think about it, you think at a practical level, you think about the test. Okay, you think about the integration test. Wait a minute, I need two tests. I need two setups because there is HTTP proxy support and then HTTPS proxy support. Okay, then it's kind of obvious that two is more than one, and maybe we need two issues.
Yeah,
but I didn't go that
Igor,
far.
Yeah, I saw that. Like, Igor want to add something.
Yeah, I recall looking at this at the MR. I don't necessarily remember the issue, and I think the contributor was more than happy to make this, and I think as we saw, it was more or less code complete. I think the struggle that they had was writing the integration test. Like, I think your feedback, Fabian, was, we need tests for this, and I think that as far as I recall, the contributor replied like, I don't have time for it. And I think initially it seems aggressive, but I think really they didn't really understand how to. Sometimes we don't understand how to write the test properly, right? So I think if we were to take a iteration kind of feedback, I think the key is maybe either, I think you mentioned the new integration test suite, but also like make it more accessible, or at least guide them further down the path about what it means to add the test. Like, here, take a look at this test and this in this thing for you to write it, because I think that was really the point where the contributor gave up, is they said, I don't have time for this, and I think they just didn't feel like figuring out our whole system. So maybe like the next sort of step would be, like, in the future, the ideal thing would be for the contributor to know and have a very good understanding of what these tests are like, and then be freer to write it.
I've got mixed feelings. I mean, I agree. Yeah, it would help in most cases. I mean, we don't have that many community contributions, but normally that would help. But in that particular case, this test for HTTP proxies was a first, and it is not a first anymore. It's now something we can document. And we can explain users, our contributors, how they can write integration tests for HTTP proxy support. That's something we can do now, but back then we didn't know. And sure, general instructions on how things are tested in these projects would help. But in that case, I don't think it would have made a difference, because I was stuck.
Well, but I would say in that case, like, I think our feedback to the contributor was, you should write tests for this. And if we don't know, and if we didn't have tests like this before, then in that case we should have just taken it over or something, or said, like, do you know what I mean? Because our feedback was write tests. And in that case, that was like basically giving them guidance into a brick wall, because we don't know. They certainly don't know. Then yeah, like that's not helpful.
Yeah, it was a bit more nuanced than that. We said we need tests, and we don't have capacity for that. Do you? And if you do, then we might help. Well, we will help you. Something like that. But to your point, it's even worse than that. I mean, it's changing, but it's worse than that. They can't even run job integration tests because of permissions. So even if they have the knowledge, they can't do it by themselves unless they clone everything, including the test projects. They're not going to do that.
Okay, so like as we're running of time, I just like propose to like we discussed the issue in full right now, and I propose to just get back to the questions that we have to answer. And this question was I wrote them, so like I'm not sure if it's a great one, but it's like a good place to start. And yeah, so how this item was implemented. And we saw that it was implemented by the community contributor in one merge request. And then we actually figure out that there is a possibility to iteration and just dropped support for HTTP proxy, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And what were the opportunities for iteration? Does anyone want to verbalize it?
Well, in my mind, and going back to what we were talking, like the first part of iteration was making it like I'm not even looking at what Fabian did, like Fabian's implementation. I'm really looking at what would have been the next iterative step to allow the community contributor to actually get as close as possible to merging this, right? And to me, it was test with the blocker, right? So to me, it would be the opportunities would have been to allow them to create a test, maybe just a, I don't know, some step towards what it would have looked like in CI, which maybe would have been, can you test this locally? Like, how would you test this locally? How would you create this locally? How would you do this manually? And then take that manual step and throw it into into a CI script, right? Because to me, like that's how I test, right? Like I do it locally, and then I see how can I turn this into a CI job. And so maybe in the future, as Fabian said, if we don't know how something is done, we could ask them, like, you need, clearly that person needed this feature. How are you using it? And then maybe we could go from there and help them show us your use case, show us how you do this locally in your bash shell, and then we can see how we can turn that into a job.
I'll show us using a test project of yours, and that's something we've never suggested to contributors. And then we would be the ones adding that to the pipeline, to automating testing.
Yeah, and to me, that's a great breakdown, right? Because we don't have to figure out everything. We get the user's use case and then we kind of generalize it to the feature that we need implemented.
It's actually a really great suggestion because I just want to remind that iteration in the context of GitLab for values is something that bring value to user. So like breaking feature in a few merge requests, and they are just like not like kind of like refactoring things. It's not iteration, generally speaking, but creating like additional step when we add some like kind of framework to write integration tests for our community contributors. It's kind of like a user-faced change, sort of speak. So yeah, it could be opportunity for integration or for iteration.
And just to mention, like sometimes when we write, like we implement a feature and then we write integration tests for it, that is our, like, I think we've seen it before, right? Like our, for example, our test integration projects like Java Maven, those are our idealized thoughts about how a project would look. But I would much rather have a user come and say, here's what my use case is, here's how I'm going to use retire.js, and then from us to go from there to create a test project rather than us idealize what we think a test project would look like, right? I think that iterative aspect that you just talked about, Tatiana, would work both ways, right? It would really help us to actually create a more real world scenario because we know at least one person did it.
I'm very excited. I agree so much with what you just said. I mean, ideally, they would test with their projects, and then we would learn from that. We would learn about their projects. That's awesome. Yeah.
Great.
We should encourage that. Not only that's a good intermediary step, but also we would benefit from that. We would learn from that.
So just to piggyback off that, maybe the step of refinement, I apologize for talking too much, but the step of refinement could be, if it comes from a user, to actually ask them for a test project. Right? Maybe that, like if a user reported it, can we just, it might not cost too much to reach out to them and ask, you know, we're looking at refining this issue. Do you have a test project that you try to use that we can maybe, you know, make public? Something that it's a dumbed down version, you know, just your public dependencies used and whatever, and we could try to use it. That could be a really great help in refining things.
But not in that case, because this constraint of using a proxy is when running a dependence scanning in a what's the name, on premises, in an environment customers don't want to share. So not in that case, but maybe in other cases. You see what I mean? I mean,
good point. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we have last question, and we have 1 minute till the end of this meeting. So what we learned and what we'll do differently. And I guess like it was already said that we need to take more attention to refinement of the customer created issues. And we probably should ask them to bring their own test projects for the merge request, right? Okay, so I'll add these answers to the issue as a comment, and you can like add more things asynchronously if you want. And I guess that's all for today. So I'll stop recording.